Hello, what we're going to be doing in this video is walk through how you can go ahead and create a client and a server using Java. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement a client server program in which the client will print a random number given by the server. Two classes should be implemented, the number client and the number server class. The number server simply generates and prints a random number whenever it accepts a connection and then closes the socket. So let's go ahead and look at the classes in JGrasp next. So the first class is a client server demo. This is going to basically run and create both our server and our client objects. So if we go ahead and take a look at the program on line 7, it implements the runnable interface. Starting on line, it'll go ahead and implement the run method. So on line 14, it calls the server's main method, passing in no arguments on the command line. So our NumberServer has a main method within that class, and what gets passed in is no arguments when the client server demo calls our NumberServer. If an exception is thrown by the NumberServer, our demo class will catch the exception and print the stack trace. And then after that, it creates and starts a new thread for our server runnable object. After that, it implements the runnable interface for our client runnable object, and it goes ahead and implements the run method. So again, what we're doing on line 36 is we're basically calling our number client.main method, passing in no arguments. And on line 39 through 41, we have our catch, where we'll catch any IO exception thrown by the number client, and we'll go ahead and print the stack trace. In the final few lines, we create our thread for our client runnable object. We start that thread, and then on line 49, we wait for the thread to die, and then we will exit the program. So what we're going to do next is we're going to look at our number client class. So our number client class on lines 1 through 4, we're importing several classes. And then on lines 8 through 10 are just various ways that you can go ahead and call the number client. Sorry about that. I received a phone call. Should have had my phone on mute. So basically what we have is on lines 8 through 10, those are various ways that you can go ahead and call the main for our number client class. The first one, you would basically use the default host and default port that are defined within our number client class. The second one, you would use the default host, and you would use the port 8189 in this example. And in the third one on line 10, you would basically use the IP address as the host and 8189 as the port passed in. So if we go ahead and look at our number client class, we have a couple of instance variables, one to hold the host and the other one to go ahead and hold the value of the port. We have a constructor that gets created passing in a host and a port number. And then next, starting on line 30, we have a main method that throws an IO exception. And basically what that's going to be doing is throwing the exception to the client server demo class. So lines 33 and 34, we've defined our default values for the host and the port. 36 and 37, we've set our new host and new port to those values. And then on lines 39 through 51, basically what we have is we have an if-else if check. So basically what we're checking, if our command arg's length equals 1, Then if one arg was passed in, we're going to go ahead and set the port to the arg. If we look back on line number 9, that would be if it was called in this type of call on the args list. And then the second one, if the args length equals to 2, what we're going to do is we're going to set the host to our first arg and then set the port to arg2, which they're actually arrays found at positions 0 and 1 in the array. So if we scroll on back up, this would be if the main was called using this format. So then what we're going to do after that is we're going to call our number client constructor, passing in our new host and our new port. And then we're going to go ahead and call the request method, which is right down below. So again, the request method will throw an IO exception, which the client server demo class will catch and display the stack trace if an exception occurs. So the first thing our client will do is create a socket object based on the host and port that get passed in. Then we're just going to print out that the client has created a socket. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get the input stream from that socket. So that will be the information that our server is going to send back, the random number that the server sends back to us. We're going to turn the stream into a scanner, and then what we're going to do is we're going to use our scanner object and read the next line, which should contain our random number. So that's what we're doing on 71. We'll print out today's random number is such and such, which gets created. And then finally on line 73, we will go ahead and close that socket. So the next class we're going to look at is our NumberServer class. So let me go ahead and open that up. So again, up above, we have our import statements. What we're creating is a server that returns a random number. There's two different ways we can call it. The first one where we do not specify a port number, so we'll use the default port, and on the second one we would pass in a port numbers passed in. In this case, the port number 8189 would get used. So in our NumberServer class then, what we have is we have one instance variable for the port number. And then in our constructor, basically to create a NumberServer object, we're just passing in a port number where we'll go ahead and set port equal to the port that gets passed in. And then we have our main method. Again, it throws an exception to our client server class. So what we have here is on line 27, we've set the default value to 8888. And then on line 28, we've defined a new port. So what we're going to do is we're going to check our command line args. If the length is greater than 0, then what we're going to do is we're going to basically retrieve the integer found at position 0, which would be our port number corresponding to the call on line number 10. Else, then what we're going to do is no args are passed in, so we'll just set new port equals to our port constant up above. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a new server object calling the constructor and passing in the value of new port. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and call the start method. So if we scroll on down to the start method, basically what it does is it starts the server. Again, it'll throw an IO exception, which will be caught by the client server demo class, which will display a stack trace for us. So basically line 51, what we're doing is we're creating a server socket. What that does is it listens to incoming connections. So in order to do that, we need to create that server socket, and we need to supply the port number when we create that server socket. So that's what we're doing on line 51. After that, we're going to display the following information after the server has started and a socket is available. So we'll just go ahead and specify the server is open and on what port it is open on. Then we'll go ahead and create an variable to go ahead and hold our socket object, and we're going to create a print writer object. So after that, we'll go ahead and create a new random number, and then basically while true, the accept method of the server classes will wait for a client connection. When a client connects, then the server program obtains a socket through which it communicates with the client. So that's what happens when the accept method gets called. And then what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and print out a message waiting for clients to connect. We're going to get a scanner and a writer from the socket object so we can go ahead and place the output, which will be our random number between 1 and 1000. Once that gets generated, we'll print the random number to our stream on line 73, and that will be the random number that the client will retrieve from that socket stream. And then on line 75, we'll empty the buffer to make sure there's nothing else stored in the buffer. And then finally, we'll go ahead and close the socket. So let's go ahead and run the program. So I'll go back into my client server demo program. We want to run it from that client server demo program. So I will just go ahead, compile everything, and I will click on the run button. So what we have here is a client open on servers open on port 8888, which is the default we use. We print out a client has created a socket. The server's now waiting for the clients to connect. A client has connected. And then finally, the server generates the random number of 942, prints it to the socket, and then the client displays that number as it retrieves that information from that socket. So I just wanted to change this up. I am going to go into our client server demo, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in a port number for our args. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose a port 999, and then we want to make sure that we're using the same port for our client and server. So I will go in and pass that same port number on our client class. And as long as I'm only passing in a port number on our client class, then basically what our if statement will read that as the port number being passed in. So let's go ahead. I'll go ahead, compile, and then I'll run the object. And now what we have here is we have a servers open on port 9999. A client has created a socket. We're waiting for the clients to connect. Client has connected, and today's random number is 907. So basically, we're just the server and client are running on a different port. Everything gets called, a new random number is generated, and then we go ahead and print that out. So that's all I wanted to cover in this video. So I hope this helps you out in the future.